Next, similar to horizontal shifting of graphs, you can also do vertical shifting by a very simple transformation. So if you have a curve y is equal to f of x. So if you replace this y by y minus k, if you replace y by y minus k, this transformation shifts the graph vertically by k units. This transformation shifts the graph vertically upwards by k units. So replace y minus k in the place of y shifts the graph vertically by k units. So let us try to understand this concept. For example, again, you have the graph y is equal to x square, and you have the graph y minus 1 is equal to x square. This is a basic graph, y is equal to x square. So if you know this graph, what do you do with this graph to get the graph of this? So if you look carefully, the only difference between this equation and this equation is, instead of y here, you have a y minus 1 here. Instead of y here, you have a y minus 1 here. So the transformation says that if you put y minus k in the place of y, the graph shifts upwards by k units. So you have k equal to 1 here. It means this graph, which is having a vertex at 0, 0, now shifts 1 unit upwards without changing the shape. Hence the graph looks like this. So the vertex of this is 0, 0. The vertex of this becomes 0, 1. That's the only difference. So y is equal to x square. Y minus 1 is equal to x square. Next, if you have the graph of y is equal to sin x. And next you have the graph of y plus 2 is equal to sin x. What's the difference between this graph and this graph? Y is equal to sin x is a very straightforward graph, which you know is a graph which oscillates. So this will be 1, this will be minus 1. So now instead of y, if you put y plus 2, graph shifts downwards this time by 2 units. That is, every point on this graph uniformly shifts 2 units downwards. So this 1 becomes minus 1. And this minus 1 becomes minus 3. And the 0 becomes minus 2. So this time this graph will lie between minus 1 and minus 3. Just this graph has shifted 2 units downwards. So I hope you understand how to shift curves upward, downward, horizontal, forward, horizontal, backward. So let us take a few examples where you do both of this. Now, for example, let us say that we need to draw the graph of y is equal to 1 by x minus 2 plus 1. So let us try to draw this graph using our knowledge of transformations. So if you carefully look at this graph, y is equal to 1 by x minus 2 plus 1. So what I try to do is I'll try to take this 1 onto the other side. So y minus 1 is equal to 1 by x minus 2. So the basic graph corresponding to this graph is 1 by x, 1 by x. If you take the graph of y is equal to 1 by x, this is a reciprocal function for which the graph is straightforward. Now in this, if you apply the transformation, x becomes x minus 2, this becomes y is equal to 1 by x minus 2. So this graph can be converted into this graph. And now in this graph, in the place of y, if you put y minus 1, you're getting the final graph. So first what I do is I'll start from y is equal to 1 by x. So how does the graph of y is equal to 1 by x look like? It is very straightforward. So the graph is a reciprocal function. The graph looks something like this. For this graph, both x-axis and y-axis are asymptotes. As x tends to 0 plus, y tends to plus infinity. As x tends to 0 minus, y tends to minus infinity. As x tends to infinity, y tends to 0 plus. As x tends to minus infinity, y tends to 0 minus. So this is the graph y is equal to 1 by x. So now let us go from this to this. So this graph can be obtained by shifting this graph 2 units forward. So let us shift this graph 2 units forward. So this asymptote, which is y-axis, also shifts 2 units forward. So this time the asymptote will not be y-axis. The asymptote will be x is equal to 2. So the line x is equal to 2 will be the asymptote this time. So the graph will be simply looking like this. So this is the graph y is equal to 1 by x minus 2. 1 by x minus 2. This graph has been shifted horizontally by 2 units. Next, let us go for this transformation. In this graph, if you put y minus 1 in the place of y, the graph shifts upward by 1 unit. So now this asymptote, horizontal asymptote, which is x-axis, also moves 1 unit upward. So that means this time the graph looks something like this. This time y is equal to 2 remains as such. So this x-axis, which is the asymptote now, will move 1 unit upwards. So you'll have a horizontal asymptote at y is equal to 1. So the graph shifts 1 unit upwards. So this is 2, this is 1, this is 1. So the graph will look something like this. So this graph has shifted 1 unit upwards. So the asymptote has moved to y is equal to 1. This also has moved 1 unit upwards. So the asymptote will be something like this. So this will be the curve y minus 1 is equal to 1 by x minus 2. So I hope you can do this from now on. Simply x becomes x minus h, move the curve forward by h units. Y becomes y minus k, move the curve upwards by k units. If you practice it well, you can do both these operations at the same time. You don't need to do one after the other. So this means that move the curve 2 units forward and 1 unit upwards. So if you can do it directly, you'll directly get this answer.